Karen throws fit at hotel pool because children are splashing. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The Mid-Range Family Hotel, nestled just off the main highway, was an ideal retreat for those seeking a blend of relaxation and family fun. It wasn't a luxury resort by any means, but it wasn't a budget motel either. The bright, inviting lobby with its polished tile floors and a faint scent of freshly baked cookies set the tone for a pleasant, if unremarkable, vacation experience. During the peak summer season, the hotel's modest amenities, like its outdoor pool, were in high demand, as families from all over the region flocked to the area for a break from their usual routines. The pool, especially, was always the main attraction, its sparkling blue waters glistening under the summer sun, beckoning both children and adults alike to cool off and have fun. For most guests, the sight of kids splashing around, laughing, and making memories was an essential part of the vacation atmosphere. The sounds of joyful shrieks, playful cannonballs, and the occasional game of Marco Polo were a constant throughout the day. While this was typical for a family-friendly establishment, it was not the kind of environment that everyone would embrace, especially those who preferred quieter, more tranquil settings. Among the hotel guests that day was a woman who, though seemingly enjoying the general charm of the hotel, appeared less than pleased by the exuberant sounds emanating from the pool area. Her name, as the staff would later come to know, was Karen, and she had arrived alone, clearly hoping to indulge in a quiet, peaceful retreat far removed from the chaotic noise of everyday life. Karen, a woman in her early 40s, had long, straight blonde hair that framed her face, her sharp features giving her an air of confidence, or perhaps even superiority. Dressed in a chic, understated black one-piece swimsuit and a large pair of oversized sunglasses, she exuded a certain level of sophistication, though her posture and the subtle way she scanned her surroundings suggested she was far from the type to embrace the laid-back atmosphere of a family vacation. She had chosen the hotel primarily for its location, away from the city's bustle, yet still close enough to the beach to enjoy some quiet time by the shore. However, what she hadn't anticipated was the overwhelming sound of children playing in the pool. From the moment Karen settled onto her poolside chair, she began to notice the children. A small group of them, perhaps 6 or 7 in total, were in the water, jumping and splashing with unrestrained glee. There was a particularly loud boy who kept leaping off the side of the pool, performing wild cannonballs that sent waves crashing over the edge, much to Karen's growing dismay. At first, Karen remained seated, sipping her ice water and silently hoping the chaos would subside. But as the minutes dragged on, and the pool's cacophony of sounds continued unabated, her frustration began to build. She fidgeted in her seat, glancing at the kids in the pool, then back to the pages of the book she had brought along, though she couldn't focus on the words with the constant noise in the background. The sounds that would have been cheerful to most became a thorn in her side. To her, the shrieks of laughter felt jarring, the splashes of water too loud, and the general noise an intrusion on her well-deserved vacation. Karen glanced over her shoulder at the other poolside loungers, noting that some parents were seated on chairs, chatting idly, their attention seemingly elsewhere. To her surprise, none of the parents appeared to be bothered by the boisterous nature of the children. Some even seemed to be encouraging it, laughing along with their kids, sharing in the fun. Karen, however, felt her patience rapidly waning. She was here to relax, to unwind in peace, not to be subjected to what she perceived as chaotic, thoughtless behavior. She adjusted her sunglasses, taking a deep breath, and glanced again at the children. The loud boy was at it again, leaping into the pool with a force that sent water splashing over the edge, his friends following suit, shrieking in delight as they played a game of tag in the water. Karen's grip tightened around the edge of her towel, and she could feel the tension in her body grow. This was no longer tolerable. The tipping point came when one of the children, possibly around 8 years old, accidentally splashed her directly, causing a small wave of water to land on the side of her chair and dampen her leg. This, she thought, was the final straw. No longer willing to quietly endure the noise, she stood up abruptly, knocking her sunglasses askew as she stormed toward the pool's edge. Her irritation, now bordering on outrage, was palpable as she moved, her body rigid, her steps purposeful and fast. At the edge of the pool, Karen stood for a moment, arms crossed, scanning the scene before her. Her eyes narrowed as she surveyed the children, now fully engaged in their game, oblivious to the impending confrontation. She cleared her throat loudly, but the sound was lost in the din of the water splashing and the chatter of other guests around the pool. She stepped closer, raising her voice over the noise. "Excuse me," she called, her tone sharp and commanding. The children nearest to her glanced up, startled by her sudden outburst. A couple of parents who were lounging nearby turned their heads, sensing that something was about to unfold. "This is a hotel, not a playground. You are all making too much noise, and it's incredibly rude to the other guests who are trying to relax." Her voice echoed across the pool area, cutting through the summer haze like a cold wind. The kids stopped in their tracks, looking at her with wide eyes. One of the parents, a father with a toddler in tow, stood up, approaching her cautiously. "Ma'am, they're just playing," he said gently. "It's a family pool, and they're having fun." But Karen was having none of it. She glared at the man, her lips pressed into a tight line. "Fun," she repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. "I'm trying to enjoy some peace and quiet, and instead, I'm being subjected to this noise. I'm a paying guest here, and I expect a certain level of decorum. Can't you control your children? This is unacceptable." The father opened his mouth to respond but quickly closed it, realizing that engaging with her would only escalate the situation. Instead, he returned to his seat, exchanging a brief glance with his partner, both of them visibly uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge her directly. Meanwhile, Karen stood her ground, her posture stiff and her gaze fixed firmly on the group of children, who were now clearly aware of her disapproval. As she stood there, waiting for some form of acknowledgement or apology, she began to imagine the kind of response she thought she deserved, a staff member coming to her aid, perhaps, or even one of the parents sheepishly apologizing for the disturbance. But the longer she waited, the more she felt her annoyance build. The parents seemed unmoved, and the children were simply confused by her outburst. Finally, Karen let out an exasperated sigh, muttering to herself, "I'm going to have to do something about this myself." Karen's frustration only grew as the seconds ticked by, her grip on her towel tightening with each passing moment. It seemed that no one was taking her seriously, no one was acknowledging the disturbance that was the source of her obvious distress. She had always prided herself on being someone who respected rules, who expected to enjoy her vacations in peace and tranquility, and yet, here she was, faced with what she considered to be a blatant disregard for her well-being. The pool had devolved into a chaotic mess of noise and disorder, and Karen felt as though she was the only adult in the entire area who understood the importance of silence. She had had enough of the splashing children, the oblivious parents, and the sheer lack of concern for anyone else's comfort. Without giving it another thought, she marched to the side of the pool where a hotel employee was wiping down a lounge chair. The staff member, a young man in his 20s, glanced up briefly, seemingly unaware of the storm that was brewing just a few feet away. Karen, however, was far from calm. She leaned forward, placing both hands firmly on the edge of the railing that separated the pool from the rest of the pool deck. Her voice, cold and clipped, pierced the air as she addressed him. "Excuse me, young man," she began, her tone sharp, "this situation has gone on long enough. I demand that something be done about the noise. There are children playing in the pool, and their behavior is utterly inappropriate for a place like this. It's completely disrespectful to the paying adults here who just want some peace and quiet. I'm trying to enjoy my time here, but instead, I'm being subjected to this chaos." The staff member blinked, taken aback by her sudden outburst. He was used to dealing with families and children at the pool, but nothing like this. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to respond. He had dealt with disgruntled guests before, but Karen's tone was unlike anything he had encountered. Still, he remained professional, offering a polite smile as he spoke. "I'm sorry about the noise, ma'am," he said, his voice gentle, "but the pool is meant to be a family-friendly area, and kids are going to play and make noise. It's part of the atmosphere here. If the noise is too much, perhaps you could try relaxing in one of the quieter areas around the hotel, like the lounge or the garden." Karen was having none of it. her face flushed with indignation, her patience now entirely depleted. How dare he suggest that she, an adult woman who had paid good money for a peaceful vacation, should just move to another part of the hotel? This was her vacation, too, and she had every right to enjoy it on her terms. The nerve of this young man to offer such an impersonal solution, it only fueled her anger further. "Move to another area," she exclaimed, her voice rising in volume. "This is the pool. The one and only pool. What kind of hotel are you running here where guests can't even use the amenities they've paid for without being assaulted by noise? Do you have any idea what this is doing to me? I'm being traumatized by these children's disruptive behavior. It's not just noise, it's emotional water trauma." The employee stared at her, blinking in disbelief, unsure of how to respond to that last remark. Emotional water trauma? What was she even talking about? He exchanged a glance with the other staff members in the vicinity, a couple of them already beginning to take notice of Karen's escalating behavior. He took a deep breath and maintained his composure, trying to remain calm despite the absurdity of the situation. "I understand that the noise might be unpleasant for some guests," he said, speaking slowly and carefully, "but I assure you, the hotel staff can't enforce silence by the pool. It's a common area for all guests to enjoy. If you're looking for a quieter environment, I can suggest you take a seat inside the lounge, where there's less noise." Karen's face turned red as she seethed with frustration. This was not the response she had expected, nor the one she was willing to accept. She had come here to unwind, to escape the stresses of her busy life, and yet, the very place she had hoped would provide solace had become a source of anguish. The idea that the hotel was more concerned with appeasing families than ensuring her comfort was an insult. She crossed her arms over her chest and glared at the staff member, her eyes narrowed in a steely, almost predatory gaze. "I don't care about your lounge," she snapped. "I'm talking about this pool. I paid for a peaceful vacation, and now I'm being subjected to this nightmare. You need to do something about these children. You need to enforce some sort of adult quiet hour. I'm not asking for much. Just an hour or two a day where people like me can enjoy the pool without being constantly interrupted by loud, obnoxious children. I'm sure you can figure something out." The employee, now looking increasingly uncomfortable, shifted on his feet, unsure of how to address Karen's demands. He was beginning to realize that this wasn't just about the noise, it was about her belief that her comfort, her peace, took precedence over everyone else's. His training had taught him to handle difficult situations with tact and diplomacy, but even he was starting to feel overwhelmed by Karen's unreasonable demands. He glanced around the pool, where the children were happily splashing and playing, utterly unaware of the drama unfolding at the edge of the water. "I'm really sorry, ma'am," the staff member said, his voice more subdued now, "but we can't enforce a quiet hour for the pool. That's not something we offer. I'll need to inform the manager if you'd like to file a complaint, but I can't do anything about the noise myself." Karen's eyes narrowed, and she took a step closer to the employee, her voice lowering to a dangerous tone. "You better tell your manager then. I am not leaving this pool until this is resolved. And if I don't get the results I want, I'll make sure everyone knows about this terrible experience. I'll tell them how this hotel allowed me to suffer from emotional water trauma. I'll make sure I get the compensation I deserve." The employee, now fully aware that Karen was not going to back down, excused himself, his steps quick as he walked away to inform his manager of the situation. Karen stood there, feeling a small sense of satisfaction as she watched him retreat. She had made her demands clear, and now, she expected them to be met. She folded her arms across her chest again and settled into the chair, her eyes fixed firmly on the pool, waiting for the next steps in this absurd but necessary battle. Little did she know, her encounter with the hotel staff would soon take a much more intense turn, and her hopes of reclaiming her peace and quiet were about to meet a hard and swift reality. Karen's heart pounded in her chest as she sat in the lounge chair, her fingers twitching with impatience. She had made her demand clear, and now, all she had to do was wait for the manager to arrive and listen to the injustice she had endured. She had been at the hotel for 3 days, and every single day had been ruined by the disruptive noise of the children in the pool. The carefree laughter, the cannonballs, the incessant splashing, it was all so overwhelming. She had come here to relax, to take a break from the stress of her life, and yet, the noise had been like a constant buzzing in her ears, a relentless, unyielding irritation. And now, after her outburst, Karen felt a sense of righteous indignation flood her veins. She had every right to demand a peaceful environment. If the hotel wasn't willing to provide that, she would make sure they understood the consequences. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sight of the hotel manager approaching from across the pool. The manager, a middle-aged man with a professional air about him, walked briskly toward Karen, his face set in a neutral expression. He had been informed of the situation by the young employee, and although he had initially hoped that it was a minor misunderstanding, he could tell from Karen's posture that this was no simple issue. As he neared her, Karen stood up, her body stiff with resolve. She could feel the eyes of the other guests on her, some of them curious, others already shaking their heads in disbelief. She didn't care. This was about her rights, her peace, and she was ready to fight for it. "Good afternoon, ma'am," the manager said, his voice calm yet firm. "I understand that you've had some concerns about the noise at the pool. How can I assist you in resolving this issue?" Karen gave him a tight-lipped smile, her tone dripping with sarcasm as she spoke. "Oh, I'm sure you've heard all about it by now. I've been subjected to emotional water trauma, thanks to the absolute chaos that's been going on in that pool. The children, splashing, shouting, making a scene, it's unbearable. And what's worse is that no one seems to care. No one is taking this seriously. I'm paying good money for a peaceful vacation, and instead, I'm being forced to listen to this noise all day long." The manager nodded thoughtfully, though his face remained impassive. He had been in the hospitality business long enough to know how to deal with difficult guests, but this was a new one. He had dealt with complaints about noise before, of course, but nothing quite like this. He cleared his throat before responding. "I understand that the noise might be disturbing, ma'am," he said, his voice steady and professional. "The pool is indeed a family-friendly area, and it's expected that there will be children playing, especially during the summer. However, I do understand your concern, and I want to assure you that we do our best to ensure that all guests have a pleasant experience." Karen's eyes narrowed, her grip tightening around the straps of her beach bag. "Pleasant experience," she repeated, her voice rising slightly. "How can I have a pleasant experience when my entire vacation has been ruined by these children? I came here to relax, to enjoy some quiet time by the pool, and all I've gotten is constant noise. It's completely unacceptable." The manager, sensing that the situation was beginning to escalate, tried to keep his tone neutral. "I can certainly appreciate your frustration, ma'am. But as I mentioned, the pool is a shared space for all our guests. It's designed to accommodate families, and while we do try to maintain a balance, there will inevitably be some noise. I'm afraid that enforcing total silence or restricting children from the pool would not be something we can do." Karen's face flushed with anger. "Enforcing silence," she repeated, her voice now a low, menacing growl. "I don't need silence. I need the children to behave. I'm not asking for a library atmosphere, I'm asking for respect. It's not too much to ask for an adult quiet hour at the pool. Just a couple of hours during the day where people like me can enjoy the pool without being bombarded by noise." The manager's brows furrowed as he listened to her demands. He had heard his fair share of unreasonable complaints during his time in the industry, but this one was particularly outlandish. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "I understand your request, but I'm afraid that implementing a quiet hour for the pool would not be feasible. We have many guests who expect a certain level of activity, especially during the summer months. Our goal is to provide an enjoyable experience for everyone, not to isolate one group of guests. We've never had a policy like that before, and it's unlikely we'd be able to enforce it." Karen's eyes blazed with fury, and she took a step closer to the manager, her voice low but edged with venom. "So, what you're telling me," she said, "is that I'm supposed to just deal with this? You're telling me that my comfort doesn't matter, that I should simply accept the noise and chaos because some people think it's fun? Is that your solution?" The manager opened his mouth to respond, but Karen wasn't finished. You know what? I'm not going to let this go, she continued, her voice rising again. I'm going to make sure everyone knows about this. I'll tell them how this hotel failed to provide any peace, how I was subjected to emotional water trauma during my stay, and how the management refused to do anything about it. You'll regret not taking my complaint seriously. The manager's eyes softened with a hint of sympathy, but he remained firm. Ma'am, I can assure you that we take all guest complaints seriously, he said. However, we can't accommodate every request. The pool is a public area, and it's meant to be enjoyed by everyone, not just one person. If the noise is affecting your stay so much, I suggest you consider other areas of the hotel. Perhaps you'd prefer a quieter environment inside, or you could visit the lounge or the garden where it's less noisy. Karen shook her head, her frustration growing to a boiling point. I don't want to move to a different part of the hotel, she snapped. I paid for a poolside experience, and that's what I expect. I'm not asking for much, just some consideration. I demand to be refunded for the disturbance I've endured. I'm sure a compensation plan could be arranged, perhaps for the mental distress I've experienced from this emotional water trauma. At this point, the manager's patience began to wear thin. He had heard enough. Ma'am, I'm afraid we cannot offer compensation for this issue, he said, his voice calm but final. We've done everything we can to ensure a pleasant stay for all of our guests, but it seems that your expectations are outside of what we can provide. I'm going to have to ask you to refrain from making further demands. If you continue to escalate the situation, I'll have no choice but to restrict your access to the pool area for the remainder of your stay. Karen's jaw dropped as she processed his words. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had demanded a resolution, and instead, she was being told that she was the problem. How dare he threaten her like that? She had paid for her stay, and she wasn't about to let this go without a fight. You can't do that, she shouted. You can't ban me from the pool. The manager's response was firm, his tone unwavering. I'm afraid that if you continue to disrupt the pool area and refuse to accept the situation, that will be the outcome. I'm asking you to leave the pool area now and reconsider your approach. Karen's face turned a deep shade of red, her fists clenched in anger. She had lost the battle before it had even truly begun, and she could feel her vacation slipping away with each word the manager spoke. With a final, seething glance at him, she turned on her heel and stalked away, her mind already formulating a plan to make her grievances known in the most public way possible. As she walked away from the pool area, her temper still flaring, Karen knew one thing for certain, she wasn't finished yet. Karen stormed out of the pool area, her footsteps quick and heavy as she made her way toward the hotel's main entrance. The air around her seemed to thrum with frustration and indignation, each breath she took feeling like a personal affront to the vacation she had so carefully planned. How could they? How could the hotel staff treat her like this, as though her need for peace and quiet was something to be ignored and dismissed? As she walked through the hotel lobby, the doors to the pool area closing behind her with a soft thud, she felt a strange mix of fury and humiliation. She had been in the right, she had been the reasonable one, and yet, she had been made to feel like the villain in her own story. She wasn't going to let this go, not by a long shot. She had every intention of making sure the hotel felt the weight of her complaints. She had already started formulating the email she would send to corporate, outlining in detail every single injustice she had suffered, starting with the emotional water trauma she had endured at the hands of the rowdy children. She knew exactly how to craft her argument. After all, she had dealt with customer service before, and she knew how to make herself heard. She was prepared to demand not just a refund but compensation for the mental distress caused by the inability of the hotel to provide her with the peaceful environment she was entitled to. After all, she had paid good money for this experience, and if she couldn't have the vacation she deserved, she would make sure no one else would either. Sitting down in the lobby, Karen pulled out her phone, tapping away at the screen with a quickness that bordered on reckless. She could already see the headlines: hotel with no respect for adults, guests' vacation ruined by noise, emotional water trauma. It would be a hit, she was sure of it. She knew how to word things in such a way that her complaints would sound utterly legitimate, how to use phrases like emotional distress and inability to relax to make her case as strong as possible. Maybe she would even mention the manager's unprofessional behavior, the way he had threatened to ban her from the pool. That would surely make an impact. She smiled to herself as she typed, imagining the moment when she would hit send and the hotel would be forced to respond. But before she could finish composing her email, she was interrupted by a tap on her shoulder. She turned, startled, only to find the young hotel employee who had first spoken to her by the pool. His demeanor had softened since their last exchange, and he looked apologetic as he stood before her. "Ma'am," he began, "I just wanted to apologize again for the situation earlier. I understand you're upset, and I'm really sorry that you're feeling this way. We want every guest to have a pleasant stay, and I can see how the noise from the pool has been frustrating. I know it's not ideal, and I genuinely wish there was something more I could have done in the moment to help." Karen stared at him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing. She had already made up her mind that she was done with the hotel, that they had no intention of meeting her needs, and that she would take her grievances to the highest level possible. This apology, coming from someone she considered to be part of the problem, felt hollow to her, almost like an insult. It wasn't enough. She wasn't interested in hearing his empty words. "Thank you for the apology," she said, her voice clipped, "but it's too little, too late. I've already made up my mind. You're just trying to placate me because you don't want to deal with the fallout. You'll see. You'll see how bad this can get." She turned away from him and returned to her phone, finishing her email with the cold determination of someone who knew their cause was just. The young man lingered for a moment longer, as though he wanted to say something else, but ultimately, he simply nodded and turned to leave. Karen didn't care. She was done with him, with the hotel, with everything. She was going to make sure they paid for her suffering. That evening, after a quick dinner in her room, Karen settled in to await the response from corporate. She refreshed her email inbox repeatedly, checking to see if the hotel's management had already gotten back to her. Hours passed, and still, there was no response. She tried to sleep, but the images of her complaint swirling in her mind kept her wide awake. She could almost hear the sound of the keyboard clacking as the hotel's corporate team scrambled to respond to her demands. She imagined them groveling, offering apologies and empty promises, perhaps even offering her a refund, though it would never be enough. No amount of money could make up for what she had lost, her peace of mind, her relaxation, her right to a quiet vacation. The following day, Karen received a call from the hotel manager. He had evidently received her complaint email and was calling to address the matter personally. As soon as she picked up the phone, Karen launched into her well-rehearsed speech, detailing her grievances once more, emphasizing how she had been wronged and how the situation had left her emotionally scarred. She was determined to ensure that her demands were taken seriously, that the hotel would be forced to acknowledge the impact their failure had had on her experience. But this time, the manager's tone was different. He wasn't apologetic or defensive. Instead, he was calm, almost patient, as he spoke to her. "Ma'am," he said, "I understand that you are upset, and I want to assure you that we do take all guest complaints seriously. However, I must be clear with you. The situation that occurred at the pool was a misunderstanding. While we try our best to accommodate all guests, it's important to recognize that the hotel's policies and facilities are designed to cater to families, especially during the summer months. I'm afraid the noise you experienced is simply part of that dynamic." Karen opened her mouth to protest, but the manager continued. "I want to remind you, ma'am, that we did offer alternatives, like the lounge and garden areas, where you could have enjoyed a quieter experience. You chose not to take those options, and while I respect that, I do think it's unfair to hold the hotel responsible for the behavior of other guests when our policy is clear. I'm sorry that you didn't find the peace you were looking for, but I do not believe any further action on our part is necessary." The words hit Karen like a slap. She wasn't going to get the compensation she had hoped for. She wasn't going to get her way. The hotel had made it clear they had done their best, and they weren't going to bow to her demands. The realization settled in slowly, her anger dissipating, leaving only a hollow feeling behind. She had spent so much energy fighting for something that, in the end, wasn't going to change. The reality of the situation was that she had overestimated her power, miscalculated how far her complaints could carry. After a long pause, Karen responded, her voice quieter than before, "I see. Well, I suppose there's nothing more to say." The manager's tone softened, almost sympathetically. "I'm truly sorry we couldn't meet your expectations, ma'am. If you decide to return to our hotel in the future, we will certainly do our best to provide you with a better experience. I hope you have a safe trip home." The call ended. Karen sat there, staring at her phone for a long moment. She had lost the battle, but perhaps, in some strange way, she had learned something. Not every fight was worth fighting. Not every demand could be met, no matter how justified she felt. As she packed her things and prepared to check out of the hotel, she realized that her vacation was over, not because the hotel had wronged her, but because she had allowed herself to be consumed by her anger. She had let it control her, and in doing so, she had missed the opportunity to find peace in other ways. With a final glance at the hotel lobby, Karen left, a little wiser and much more tired than when she had arrived.